20 minutes. Apologies for the late start, but I think if everybody is fine with it, we should just get going and start listening to Abdusame's paper on the adoption of zero tillage, safe for intensified production cost evidence from Kyrgyzstan. Yeah?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Tilman. Hello, everybody, and let me share my presentation. So.
Okay, it's loading. I'll give you feedback when I see it. That looks great. I wondered, yeah, exactly. If you click that button.
It's okay?
Super, it's perfect. We see everything really clearly. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody, again, and welcome to our session, and thanks for attending our session. Today, I will present about zero tillage adoption and its impact on production costs in case of Kyrgyzstan. So, by the way, I'm Tadjiev. I am a PhD, currently I'm a PhD student at IAMO. Yeah. And the outline of my presentation, in the beginning of my presentation, I will tell a problem background, then I will explain conceptual framework and data discussion. Then I will shift to explain the methodology that we use it in our study. And finally, I will tell the preliminary results and conclusions. Yeah. In developing countries, including in Central Asian countries, increasing land and water productivity is one of the main issues. So especially in during the Soviet Union time and after the collapse of the Soviet Union time, due to inefficient use of land resources and the lack of land management system, influence to land degradation in Central Asia. As you see in the right side of the presentation, there is a map of Central Asian countries, and there are several red hot spots which explains land degradation zones in Central Asia. So as you see, almost all Central Asian countries have land degradation problem. And furthermore, rural households have limited physical, financial, and human resource problems. Besides that, some zones in Central Asia have soil erosion problems, especially in the mountain place of Kyrgyzstan have soil erosion problems. So to resolve such problems, we assume that adoption of sustainable agriculture practices is one of the options. So adoption of zero tillage also can be one of the options to resolve such problems. And several scholars explain the advantages of zero tillage. For instance, several scientists talk about agronomic benefits of zero tillage methods. For instance, by adopting zero tillage methods, nitrogen will be reduced, and soil erosion will be also reduced by 57%. Yes, and as well as by using zero tillage, soil organic carbon will increase by 38%. So it will also influence to accumulate more carbon in soil. And besides agronomic benefits, an adoption of zero tillage method has some economic benefits. For instance, several researchers, several scientists explain that adoption of zero tillage method will reduce land preparation costs, also reduce farmers' working time for land preparation. Furthermore, zero tillage adoption will decrease oil or labor and machinery costs. Besides land productivity, zero tillage also may increase water productivity, so it will improve water savings. Yes. And also several agricultural economics also investigate the relationship between zero tillage adoption and input use in their empirical studies in case of developing countries. So, and they found different relationship between zero tillage adoption and input use. Some researchers found statistically significant and positive relationship between zero tillage and input use, mainly labor use and fertilizer use. And some scholars found statistically significant and negative relationship between zero tillage adoption and input use. In contrast, some studies found statistically insignificant positive and negative relationship between these two variables. So in all these studies are focused on developing countries, but not Central Asian countries, because in case of Central Asia, there is a lack of studies about zero tillage, lack of empirical studies about zero tillage adoption and its impact on input use, especially no any studies based on pan-data approach. So, and as you see, science found a different impact of zero tillage adoption on outcome variables, on input use. From this perspective, in our study, we aim to investigate whether adoption of zero tillage will increase or decrease production costs in rural households. This is the main goal of our study. And to achieve our goal, we conceptualize that households or households may adopt zero tillage methods if their expected utility is higher than non-adoption. As well, and zero tillage, we assume also zero tillage adoption will be related to several factors, including household characteristics, plot characteristics, institutional location factors, and assume that adoption of zero tillage method will influence the input costs. In our case, we are going to measure land preparation, land weeding, labor, and herbicide costs. Yeah, and in our study, we use life in Kyrgyzstan dataset. We use only two-year waves, 2016 and 2019 waves. And we know that life in Kyrgyzstan data is conducted from 7 provinces and 2 cities. And but in our study, we had to drop some variables, some data observations from dataset, because we only focus on households who surveyed in both years, both 2016 and 2019, and we dropped it out households if they participate only 1 year. And also we found some outliers from variables, especially variables related with input costs, and therefore we decided to drop the outliers also, as well as we found some differences comparing 2016-2019 in case of plot size, and therefore we also dropped this some observations. And in our study, we focus on mainly rural households. Therefore, we dropped households from 2 cities, which is Bishkek and Bost cities. And after that, we had totally more than 1,300 observations in 2016 and more than 1,400 observations in 2019 after dropped all these variables. And households have maximum 6 plots, especially most households have 2 plots. And in our study, zero tillage adoption is one of the main outcome variables. So in this survey, households were asked what types of tillage methods were used in this field, and they were recommended 8 tillage methods, 8 options, and they had to choose two most important methods for one field. So in our case, if households choose second or seventh tillage methods, so that means these households used zero tillage methods. If they choose, for instance, second field, other methods, not second or third, but seventh, but other methods. So that means this household is not using zero tillage methods. By measuring like this, we finally generated dummy variables of zero tillage adoption. So in our case, if households adopt zero tillage methods in particular plot, so it's equal to 1, otherwise 0. So in this table, given adoption level of zero tillage methods in 2016-2019 across provinces. So in totally, we see in 2019, 3 times more plots adopt zero tillage methods and comparing to 2016. Yeah. And so here given some experimental variables in our study, in our model, we use some experimental variables, but in this table, I give some selected variables and across adopters and non-adopters, and these variables are for both years. We pulled data, and as you see, in education level of households, employment in agriculture sector, and as well as plot size is higher for zero tillage adopters comparing to non-adopters. But however, number of assets is lower zero tillage adopters comparing to non-adopters. This is some experimental variable descriptive statistics of some experimental variables, and in addition, in our case, we have also 4 main outcome variables. In the survey, farmers asked about the costs related with labor, land preparation, and land weeding and herbicide cost. Sorry. And this table also explains the differences between zero tillage adopters and zero tillage non-adopters of input costs. So as you see, labor costs and land preparation and seeding costs are higher for non-adopter groups comparing to adopter groups. However, machinery costs, total herbicide costs, and total cost is higher for zero tillage adopted plots comparing to non-zero tillage adopted plots. So, there are main descriptive statistics of main variables, outcome and experimental variables, but to better understand how is the relationship between zero tillage adoption and these outcome variables, these production inputs, we use econometric model, regression model, and we use 2-stage endogenous regression model. In the 4th stage, logic model is used to understand the relationship between zero tillage adoption and other experimental variables, including variables at plot level, variables at household level, and we also to account an observed heterogeneity, we use also model-like approach. According to model approach, the mean of time varying variables are calculated, and this variable it will also added to logic model. And furthermore, we also add province and time dummy variables to test the differences of zero tillage adoption across provinces and across year. Yeah. In the second stage, simple OLS model is used in two steps for adopters and for non-adopters. So the same variables are used in the second stage also. But however, in the second stage, in the endogenous switching regression model, considering selection bias is important. Therefore, we compute inverse Millis ratio, which was recommended by Heckman. So from the fourth stage logic model, we compute inverse Millis ratio, and we add it in the second stage model to consider selection bias. And also several scholars emphasize an endogenous switching regression model to account also instrumental variables, instrumentals, which influence to the fourth stage logic model, but not influence to second stage OLS model. So the falsification test shows that in our case, distance to main road is a valid instrumentals, which influence to fourth stage logic model, but not influence to second stage OLS model. So after all calculation, and finally we to test the impact of zero tillage adoption on production inputs, we use average treatment effects. Yeah, this is a model that we use in our study, and in this slide I will explain the results. So this slide in this table given fourth stage logic model results according to logic model results. So probability of zero tillage adoption is positively related with employment in agriculture and distance to the field and distance to main road. And also in the analysis show that households from Jalalabad, Osh, and Talas provinces are less likely to adopt zero tillage method compared to households of Istanbul provinces. So in our case, Istanbul is a reference province. And also households using fertilizers and households with own assets is also negative relationship with zero tillage adoption. So this is the first stage model results, but in our study main research question is how is the impact of zero tillage on production inputs. So in this here given the results of production inputs. So the results show that adoption of by adopting of zero tillage methods, households the land preparation costs, land weeding costs will be reduced, but however labor costs and herbicide costs will be increased by adopting zero tillage methods. But in total, general total cost will be decreased by using zero tillage methods. So yes, this is the primary results in our study, and from these results we conclude that will there from negative effect of a number of owned assets on zero tillage adoption, we conclude that will their householders may least likely to adopt zero tillage methods because they may use mechanized service and tractors instead of applying zero tillage methods. And Also, the probability of adoption of zero tillage methods will be increased. Households with more number of plots, and if households plots are located further away from their dwelling and from the household dwelling. And also results show that zero tillage adoption will decrease land preparation and land weeding costs, but increase labor costs and harvest costs. So we conclude that zero tillage may be attractive for reducing machinery costs, but not it will improve labor costs in households, among households in Kyrgyzstan. So what is our policy recommendations? So, from our results, we recommend that policymakers should promote zero tillage adoption among rural households as a way to reduce machinery costs. Because promoting zero tillage adoption as a labor saving or harvest reducing practice will create false expectation among smallholders. Yes. And this is the last of my slides, and thank you very much for your attention. If you have any comments, questions, I will be glad to answer it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Abdusame. A really interesting and relevant topic, especially with the climate crisis unfolding. And there are two questions in the chat, and can we maybe, I can read them out so everybody can hear them in case somebody can't see the chat, but in case one of the commentators would like to weigh in person, of course, you're very welcome. I don't mean to, discourage that. Maybe I see Michael. I'll
yeah.
And so, Michelle, did you have your hand up as well, or not? Just to...
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then why don't we go in the order they came? Michelle, you asked briefly, and then Michael. I'd like to collect a couple. I also have some points I'd like to make in a moment. And then we just have to be all brief, and then the two authors who are present can briefly reply, and then we move on to the next paper. Thank you. So Michelle first, please.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand the wider context and understand why people would not already be doing zero tillage, or what are the benefits from doing non-zero tillage. Thanks.
Yeah, excellent point, I think. And Michael?
Yeah, my question was about labor costs, because I've done some irrigation economic water policy analysis in Uzbekistan, and it's hard to take any sort of estimation of labor costs in that country overly seriously. And then the next question is just a statistical type question, and it can wait. But I think this issue of how climate might affect all this analysis in 10, 20, 30 years, I think is a critical part. That would be great for the discussion.
Yeah. Maybe you can also type the statistical comments so the authors get it for sure.
Oh, they're in the chat.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Yeah. I thought it was interesting to see like the fact that if the land was further away, people were more likely to do it. It suggested to me that this was indeed a substitute for alleviating the labor constraint to some extent. Yeah. And then of course you can take that result and you can say, well, in that case, I don't know, you could move all households further away from their plots, and then they would do more zero tillage, but that's obviously not what we want. So maybe the constraint is the labor and not the understanding of the zero tillage. Yeah. So I'm not sure yet I go along with the conclusions. The second thing is, like, it must be vastly uncertain to try this out. Yeah. And if you depend on your farming income, then, trying this out on a larger scale might be quite risky ex ante, and it might perceived or appear to be risky. So I wondered if you had that sufficiently covered. And finally, just also technical comment, you have two ways where people do it. So can't you look at the change and do like a fixed effects thing, and then all these fixed effects would drop out from your estimation? Because knowing it's more or less an easy equal, I don't think that really helps you in the econometrics. I wondered if it'd be better to model the change in adoption rather than but maybe the numbers are too low, I'm not sure. Okay. Those were my comments. You may not be able to reply in 3 minutes to all these questions, but feel free to try it or to be selective. That's fine as well. So back to you, Abdusame, or if Nodir wants to come in, that's fine as well. It's up to you guys.
Sorry, first of all, thanks for your comment, Tilman, and speaking from us. Yeah, related to model in the fixed epic, actually we use moon-like device approach, which is also considering maybe another heterogeneity, but anyway, thanks for comments, I will consider it. And also other questions, but I'm sorry, a little bit difficult to catch questions. With Michelle's questions there. The benefits of non-zero tillage. Michelle, I'm sorry, but I couldn't calculate the benefits, profits of non-zero tillage adoption, non-zero tillage adoption, that we focus on only costs. Because in the case of Central Asia, also in Kyrgyzstan, most households may use zero tillage as a cost minimization. So, because there are some problems, financial problems in among households. Yeah, but we don't consider the benefits of zero tillage adoption or zero tillage, non-zero tillage adoption. But yeah, it is the case also in why households not use zero tillage. Yeah, it is one of the main research question, and yeah, we'll investigate it. Despite the advantages of zero tillage, several households not use this method. Maybe it will relate some education or religious practices. Maybe they don't know more information about it. Yeah. And also then Mikhail's question about labor costs. Actually in questionnaire households were asked, in our case, only we calculate higher maybe anyway. We focus on only costs, labor costs for hired labor, not own households' own costs or yeah, other costs, but only in the questionnaire households were asked how much sum in Kyrgyzstan, how much sum they pay for hired labor. So we give this variable in our case, but not other labor costs. We don't consider. And second question was outliers affecting results. Yeah, the outliers. But I cannot say that yeah, because how is the impact of including outliers, but we generate we converted missing value because I don't know such big strange differences between comparing 2016 and 2019. So what we decided to dropped out these variables, but I cannot say that how is the impact of this including outliers in our model. Yes, hope I understand your questions.
Thank you. I think you did. I remember I had a final comment, but you don't need to reply to that. It's just a comment. I thought it'd be nice if you had one more slide at the end where you link your results back to the literature, you know, what you contribute, like just to sort of put that in context again. That would be nice. Yeah. So this, you say what you find, but then it would be nice sort of, for the journal article, it'd be nice to say, this is what I found, and that's in contrast with the literature or complemented or whatever. Yeah? So okay. Just a small thought. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Then if you could perhaps stop sharing now, and we let Michael share his screen.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks again for a great talk. Yeah, that's right. Lots of clapping. Okay, and Michael will talk about weather short experience and risk preferences of livestock keepers. Also,
Yes, exactly.
it's great. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly. Can everybody listen me?
We hear you. Yes, that's fine.
Okay,
I
perfect.
presume you have slides, right?
Yes, I got
That would
slides.
be the econ talk of the year otherwise.
Yes, 1 second. Yes, I just need to start. So can everybody see the full screen or?
We see something. Yeah, now it's loaded. Yeah, that's perfect. I hand over to
Okay,
you.
perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Perfect. Nice. So hello everybody. My name is Michael Bödecker and I will present results of my master thesis, which I have written at Humboldt University about weather shock experience and risk preference of livestock keepers. I just seen that one of my co-supervisors is also attending this session today. So hello to Nodir. Also very thank to him because he guided me a lot during my master thesis. And yeah, and I'm happy to present a bit. Yes, the thesis is structured as follow.
Michael, I'm sorry that I interrupt you right at the beginning, but you probably don't see it. Our interpreters ask us to slow down because Russian apparently has 30% more words or letters. So
yeah, sure. I forgot about this.
And my apologies to our interpreters for me perhaps speaking fast as well. So let's continue slowly. We have enough time. You can talk slowly. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So this will be my structure. I will start with my motivation, then a little bit about the theory behind my topic. Then I will describe the data a bit, then the methodology I used, then the results, which I find it, and I discussion to it, and the implications and the conclusion. Yes, and yes, my motivation is because as we know, livestock is an important part in the agriculture and production, and also in the context of a transition economy. Livestock keeping represents the main source of income for low-income households in developing countries besides crop farming. So, and also we know that large amounts of livestock can reduce the risk of poverty. So caring about livestock keeping is very important for this topic. And also when we talk about farming, every decision-making process involves some kind of risks or some shock experience. So especially in farming, farming is exposed to a lot of risks. And so risk preferences become central in farmers' decision-making processes. For example, for coping strategies, also for investment behavior and risk evaluation. So understanding the determinations of risk preferences is very important. So that's one of my motivation. And especially agriculture is exposed to a lot of risks, which require coping strategies like ex ante and ex post we talk usually about. And so we also know that agricultural production heavily relies on the climate variability. Like livestock keeping is not as exposed as crop farming, for example, but livestock not only is exposed to weather shocks to animal health, but also like to fodder availability. And also there have been a lot of studies which focused on shock experience and risk preferences, but there have been plenty of studies, but most of them are inconclusive whether shock experience leads to risk aversion or to risk seeking or has no impact at all. So this was one of my motivations that I contribute to this literature to investigate the experience. And also studies on livestock keepers and Central Asia are very limited in this topic. So my motivation is to investigate the relationship between weather shock experience and risk preferences. Yes, so regarding the theoretical background, I already talked about the literature. Like we know, economic theory assumes usually the stability of risk preference, especially if you talk about micro and macroeconomics. But also behavioral theory suggests that there's some room for behavioral learning through experiences. So, however, the empirical literature on the relationship between shock experience is mainly inconclusive, and there are mainly 3 arguments which are usually used. Like there's one, this break-even hypothesis, which says that an individual after experience a shock is motivated to break even. So that shock experience leads to more risk-seeking behavior. The opposite effect is the so-called house money effect, so that the individual is afraid of getting more shocks, so it's getting more to risk aversion. And like the most common view is like that the risk preference are stable over time. Yeah, but however, like also in the field of natural hazards and weather extremes, shock experience literature is inconclusive. So, and also most of the studies which investigated natural hazards have only used subjective approaches, so not measured weather data. So this was one additional motivation for my study. And also about the Kyrgyz livestock sector, we know that Kyrgyzstan is a very mountainous country. There are different statistics, but the most common is that 90% of the country is covered by mountains. So it has a natural scarcity of arable land, which makes livestock keeping a very important source of income. So livestock plays a central role in this rural economy. So Kyrgyzstan is particularly interesting to investigate the livestock keeping sector and how, and also Kyrgyzstan is exposed to climate change. It's supposed as one of the countries which is most vulnerable to climate change, and most experts agree that this climate weather extremes will increase in the future. So how, and we have already known that risk preference are very central in farming processes. So that's why it's important to know how this weather extremes shapes the risk behavior of livestock keepers. And also we know that Kyrgyzstan have undergone a lot of privatization reforms since 1991. And also livestock is mainly kept on pastures, so outside. So it's particularly important how weather shocks shape this livestock. Yes. So a little bit about the data. I've written my master thesis with live in Kyrgyzstan data. It's was very useful because of during COVID, data collection was almost impossible, and it's a multi-topic data, I really know, and tracking a total of 3,000 households. But which is also particularly interesting is that the wave of 2016 have used different elicitation methods of risk preferences. So there was this one question, how do you define yourself as a person who's willing to take risks? But also we had like one situation where an individual could choose in a lottery situation could choose between different 5 options with 2 different outcomes where the expected payoff was varying. So this is also like one method to elicitate risk. So this is particularly interesting to find different ways of eliciting risk preferences. So this was also one motivation. Yeah, in total there were 3,000 households and 8,000 individuals, but unfortunately could only use 884 livestock keeping households of them and 1,351 individuals, which I could use for my regression analysis. Yes, and the second thing was the weather data. Like in Live of Kyrgyzstan, it was also asked about weather shock experience, but this would represent more subjective approach. And I was using external weather data by NASA MERAT 2. This was very promising because there's a global coverage, and you can use it for the the community level. So that's why I use this one, and it's have also proven to be very accurate because I've compared it with NOAA weather data, and it usually mostly shows it's quite reliably shows weather dates. Yeah, and based on the coordinates of each community, I was merging weather data with the LDK survey data with the community where the individual was residing. Yes, regarding the methodology, the way I was calculating weather shocks, it was I was using the definition of outlier values. So outlier values is defined if a value is deviating more than 2 standard deviations from the historical mean, and that's what I was basically using. I was considering the dates from January 2010 until September 2016 because Live from Kyrgyzstan was only conducted at the end of the year in 2016. And I was only using this study wave, and I was comparing it with the historical meanly data from 1990 till 2010. So yes, and I was considering extremely cold months and extremely hot months. So based on temperature data and also on precipitation data. And as shocks, I was only defining those not on the daily level, but on the monthly level, because I was thinking that if an individual just experience a shock on one day, that it might be not perceived as a shock, but if they perceive a month with a particular hot or cold, then it's more perceived as a shock. And regarding the measurement of risk preferences, I was taking a self-assessment approach once. So how do you see yourself as an individual willing to take risks? So lower range on the scale from 0 to 5 represents risk aversion. And for the incentivized measures, I was calculating this options 1, which represents risk aversion. So where outcome A and B is equal. And for the model, I used the multi-logit model. So I was once using incentivized measures as dependent variable for risk aversion, and which takes 0 for no risk aversion. And I was using the same approach for the self-assessments. So I was comparing the models to investigate whether there are differences between the effect of risk of weather shocks. But also I was taking some other explanatory control variables which were used in other studies, so to compare the effects and how it relates to the literature. And the number of weather shocks calculated in months is considered as independent variable. Yeah, so this is like some descriptive statistics. We could see that the educational level, like on the scale from 1 to 8, was quite homogeneous. Like majority had like upper second class education, and also like that it was quite diverse in terms of gender. So like more than half of the respondents were male, and that the average distance to livestock market was like 8,000 meters roundabout. And the household size was like 6 or 7 members in the herd. And the average herd size was also 24, and an individual has like more than one species of livestock, so it was also quite diversified. Yes, if I compare the respondents of the risk preferences, like regarding the incentivized measures and the self-assessments, we can see no apparent relationship at the first hand. So this means like individuals who were like, who reported like more risk. Sorry, this was the first. Who were like reported risk aversion in this in the self-assessment were not lying and had not chosen risk averse options in the lottery or in the selling situation. So we can see there's no apparent relationship between risk aversion in the lottery and in the selling situation, but I was not calculating this further. Yeah, and regarding the estimation results, we can see that number of low rainfall months and number of cold winter months is mostly significant. So these are the models which use self-assessment data. So in this case, risk aversion was only counted if the individual has taken option 0 of 10 that is risk averse, and B is measuring options 0 till 4, so like the lower half, to see how reliable are these answers. And we could mainly see that number of low rainfall, and this is like the lottery and selling situation. And we can see that low rainfall months is very significant in all models. But interestingly, we see the opposite effect in the self-assessment than in the lottery, for example. Like in the number of low rainfall months, for example, in self-assessment, if an individual has experienced more low rainfall months, his odds for being risk averse decrease, but in the lottery situation it increase, which is like an interesting finding. And also we see that being male reduces the risk for risk aversion in all models, which is also in line with the literature in most studies. And here I was testing for the robustness, so I was extending the number of options counting as risk aversion. For example, in the lottery situation, I was in this model only counting option 1 as risk aversion, but here I was extending it with option 1 and 2, option 1 till 3, to see how reliable this is. And we see that most findings are usually stay quite reliably, so that weather shocks still remain significant. Yeah, and the implications of my study is that weather shocks and risk aversion are significantly correlated, but the estimation results vary between and within models. So that would mean that certain weather shocks, for example, low rainfall and cold winter months, lead to risk aversion in incentivized measures, but to risk seeking in self-assessment. 1 second. Yeah, so it means that weather shocks are not equally perceived by livestock keepers as shocks. This is particular, can be seen by number of high rainfall months, so that high rainfall month might be even perceived as a gain and not as a shock for livestock keepers, according to my model. And the findings were quite difficult to conclude because, not to understand, because there were not many studies who have used both approaches, and some studies have found that risk aversion in incentivized measures and in self-assessments lead to similar results. But I found one study which says that emotional reactions towards risk can differ from cognitive evaluations of risks. So this means there's a way how an individual can perceive a shock and how it can evaluate it, so that there might be differences. And I found one recent study regarding the COVID-19 experience which used different elicitation methods, but it has concluded opposite effects, so that shock experience leads to risk aversion in incentivized measures, but to risk seeking in self-assessment. No, opposite. So this was interesting, and yeah. And as other studies have already found out, self-reports really predict incentivized risk preferences. So this is also one finding. And what I already said is that female livestock keepers are less risk-seeking than male in all of my models, which I calculated, and this is also in line with most of the other studies which I found. Yeah, however, my findings have some limitations because as we have seen that most respondents of risk preferences in both approaches laid in the middle range, which might be traced back to indifferences. So how reliable these findings might be limited. And also the calculation of weather shocks was based on spatial factors, which can be traced back to similar weather patterns, but also it could mean that other spatial factors might be involved. And also we know that general risk preferences, as measured in the Life of Kyrgyzstan survey, might have limited explanatory power to predict risk management in agriculture production and insurance decisions. And this is just a with and without approach, which I used in my master thesis. And I only used the survey wave of 2016 because the lottery game situation was only asking this survey wave, so I could not use, unfortunately, the panel data approach of the recent years. So maybe tracking panel data to observe changes in risk preferences over time might be more promising to see these findings, but however, the findings are very intuitive and might be a first step. And I found out that weather extremes shape risk preference of livestock keepers significantly, and that not all weather shocks extremes are perceived as shocks for livestock keepers, for example, intense rainfall. So also my findings might be not necessarily limited to livestock keepers, as the response behavior of all individuals was similar. And also the findings are important not only for policymakers, but also for the establishment of local insurance markets, and also for the future as climate change trends will increase. And we also have seen that using different elicitation methods of risk preferences can lead to contradicting estimations results. So this is very important that research and policy should not only rely on one single elicitation method for measurement of risk preferences, and should be always linked to the question which is being asked. Yeah, so this was my presentation. I could not see the time. I hope it was not more than 20 minutes.
It was perfect. It was absolutely wonderful. Exactly 20 minutes. So thank you for sticking to that. And it's a very interesting talk. Great use of the data. I remember us putting that module into the survey at the time, and it was part of somebody's particular research agenda. So you benefited from that module. Yeah. But that year we totally overdid it with questionnaire length, and so we had to do the chop in the next wave. But it's not inconceivable that one puts it back in later, and then can check for the same people their risk preferences many years apart. Yeah, but with the same method, which would then, if you stay within the method, if you list it the same way, would overcome some of those concerns. I might not care whether I get the true ones or not, but I get it at least with the same bias, yeah, and then it washes out, yeah, looking at possible change in risk attitudes. It's a bit late now, given it's your thesis, but I think you did quite well with it, right? Deservedly so. But I did wonder, I wasn't entirely convinced why you restricted it to livestock keepers, and you did mention it at the end, yeah, that you that in principle should be possible with everybody, because risk is something that everybody has to deal with and faces, yeah. And so knowing people's risk preferences, etc. And I think the weather, even, livestock holders may have one way of dealing with it, but other people, even if you're a taxi driver, then lots of rainfall is probably good for your business or something, so it, just to say that it might affect a lot of people in different ways, yeah. Maybe we can collect further comments and questions. I hadn't seen anything in the chat yet, but if somebody wants to raise their hand or just unmute and start talking, then no, is everybody convinced that Kyrgyzstan has weather and livestock and risk preferences, or or are people tired after two-day conference? Okay, as I said, I liked it. I think you did very well. I'm sorry not getting one or two more comments here. We didn't have organized discussions. I think there wouldn't have been enough time for that. But really well done. Also really nice presentation, actually. Fantastic graphs. So that was also really impressive. Yeah, like and nice merging of data. Yeah, that was also nice, data sources. Yeah, the way you put that in. Michael, do you just want to say briefly? I mean, after all, you share the same first name.
I think in general discussion, I think climate sort of should be an organizing principle about what people have found and how it's going to be different. I think that's, this is agriculture, and so it's an extremely sensitive sector. That's all. So, but maybe after the third talk, and I think some of these
we can have some more general discussion. That's fine.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I understand. Sorry, you didn't mean later, as in, but you meant within this session. Okay, I understand you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure. Let's do that. So, in that case, let's thank once more Michael for his great presentation. And I invite Michelle now to give her talk on household response to improvements in water infrastructure, evidence from Periurban, Kyrgyz Republic. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I trust everybody can see my slides. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this work. It's the first presentation I'm making, so I'm very pleased for any comments or on the paper. This is joint work with Elcin Akcura from the World Bank and Leon Bost from the University of Hohenheim. And I'm obligated to say this work does not represent the opinions of the EBRD, my employer, or of the World Bank. Okay, so the motivation of this paper, trying to understand now how households respond to improvements in infrastructure, is because there is a substantial problem actually with access to basic water services globally. 771 million people lack basic drinking water services. And in Kyrgyz Republic, as much as 1/3 of households also do not have access to reliable, safe, and clean water inside their homes. Now, enhancing access is a key development goal for the development community, but there's a few problems that we have to solve. One I'll mention briefly on the next slide is that we don't quite understand what motivates people to sign up with utility companies and adopt house taps. But also utility company, why it matters, right? So if I'm a utility company, I set up shop in a town, why does it matter if someone takes a tap? Well, it's very expensive to maintain the water utilities, and underinvestment leads to a vicious cycle where people then don't trust you. So your services are poor because you're underinvest, because you don't have enough customers, and then you can't get more customers because your services are poor. And this further undermines then cost recovery. Moreover, having a well-functioning water utility is really important for the future of water management in most cities. The place where we do this study has some really nice groundwater, and there's actually a lot of households accessing clean water through private wells. But as the population grows, this could become difficult to manage. So really thinking, in development, we're always asking the question of how do we get people to do things that the social planner wants them to do, and we need to equally ask, well, what if they don't need to be doing it? But in this case, and that's one of the questions I had for this town where we do the study. If the groundwater's nice and people are happy, why do they need tap water? Well, part of it comes from the fact that the city's growing, and water management, water stress is a major issue for the region, and so we need to be thinking about how to deal with that down the road. So the main research questions then are, can improvements in water infrastructure attract new customers for the water utility company? So you take this deteriorating infrastructure, you make some improvements, does that attract customers? Do they also change their willingness to pay for water services in response to improvements? Willingness to pay is a known issue in water water services globally, in more developed and less developed countries alike. Water bills are a very political issue, and in these former Soviet countries, water has been in the past free or very cheap. And as we try and help these countries modernize their billing procedures, we have to keep an eye on what people are willing to pay for. So do people increase their willingness to pay when you give them a better service, or do they not? Or rather, do they decrease it? Finally, can we talk about economic benefits to the household? So there is a small literature that traces economic benefits of water infrastructure to time savings. And so we also add some insight into that question with this paper. To address these research questions, we take an evaluation approach of an EBRD water infrastructure improvement project that was done in Tillage between 2015 and 2019. So we wrote a survey that we implemented in each of those 2 years. So we have a baseline and endline survey with a panel sample. And we treat households that are within the zone that they could have been impacted by the project as treated, and then households outside of this area as the control. The project involved fixing leaks and modernizing billing systems, and then also giving households option to install a private tap, but the installation was at the household's own expense. Due to some issues with comparability between the treatment and control groups, we're going to use a doubly robust difference in difference technique, which I'll talk about in more detail in the coming slides. And another important contribution of our work is how we measure willingness to pay, and the fact that we're going to look at it over time. This is an innovation in the literature. I mentioned that the study site is Tillage. This is in northern Kyrgyzstan, and what's important for this audience is that Tillage has abundant use of private wells, as I mentioned, so there's a good outside option. And if you want to wean people off of private wells for water management reasons, what do you need to do? Also, the legacy of the communist regime, and in Tillage in particular, the water utility has not always been well run. There has historically been problems with trust, and in terms of the billing, rates have always been quite low. They do not have historically not supported cost recovery, and the company would not regularly cut service to people who were not paying their bills. So as you modernize the systems and start charging more, which was part of the utility company's goals with this project, moving from a norm-based billing to metered billing eventually, what are you going to get? Are you going to have people run away from the utility company or not? This is a map of the study area. The white lines indicate streets. So most of our sample falls to the south of this river. And indeed, there is no water pipe network north of the river. So those extra households up there are somewhat outliers. The pink area highlights where the pipe repairs were made, and anything within 2 city blocks of a pipe repair is considered to be, possibly treated. We're operating without precise information from the utility company. So we've tested a few different. We know where the leaks have been repaired, but we don't necessarily know which pipes serve which homes. So we've looked into information, engineering information about how these systems work and who could have conceivably benefited from the repairs. So, and tried a number of different borders. The border that you see here is the widest one. So this runs the risk of having some, say, control households included in the treatment group, but results are robust to changing where this outline is. Then the yellow dots are approximate location of the households in our sample. In this slide, I show you some descriptive statistics comparing the treatment and control groups, and the final column on the right is the difference between these two groups, and there's a lot of differences, and this just underlies the importance of the procedure, the econometric procedure we use. So people within the treatment area are more likely to already be utility company customers. They're less likely to be using a private well. They're more likely to have house tap infrastructure, etc. Yeah, so the differences are not so important as what we do to address them and make our treatment and control groups comparable. The hypotheses that we test is actually sixfold. We hypothesize that the infrastructure improvements will increase the portion of households with a private connection. We hypothesize that it will increase the probability that they use a house tap as the primary source of water instead of a yard tap, for example. This is a half as expensive to install a yard tap compared to a house tap. We expect a change in willingness to pay, but the previous presentation pointed out some of the reasons why people may respond positively and may respond negatively to changes. Willingness to pay may have similar behavioral responses. So when you don't have something, your willingness to pay might go toward infinity, but once you get it, then you scale back. On the other end, you may realize the value of the service and decide your willingness to pay was incorrectly stated prior when you did not have the information. So we will test changes in willingness to pay, but we do not have a strong prior on which direction the change would go. We expect a decrease in time spent on water-related chores. So if households are moving from a situation where they're using their private well to one where they have a tap inside the house, we expect to see changes in time spent managing water and collecting water, etc. And then correspondingly an increase in time spent on other activities. The literature also points out that bathing may have particular results different from other water-related activities. So bathing is both leisure and labor, depending on if you're just, taking a cold shower quickly to get out of the house because you haven't heated up the water, or you have a nice warm shower and then you go to work, or maybe you're bathing your children, or maybe you're in the sauna. So there's lots of ways to think about bathing. So we just, it could go up, could go down, but we expect some change. I'm going to spend a little bit of time describing how we estimate willingness to pay. Then I will describe the doubly robust difference in difference methodology and then move to the results. So willingness to pay is one of the main outcomes of interest. We look at willingness to pay for 4 different qualities of water service or attributes. One is the quality, so is it clean and drinkable? How much are you willing to pay to get water that's clean and drinkable as opposed to somewhat dirty? Water pressure, and this is measured in terms of how long it takes to fill a kettle from your tap or yard tap or house tap. The frequency of any intermittence, so when water is cut because of inadequate flow or other problems in the network, how often does that happen? And then the duration of intermittence, how long does it take for those things to be fixed? Now, in a choice experiment, a survey respondent is given a number of alternatives to choose from. And it's kind of, you get a list where the quality is specified maybe as clean and drinkable, but maybe the pressure is low, and frequency of intermittence and duration of intermittence are both low. And then that would be compared to another alternative where perhaps quality is poor, but say pressure is very high. And when you give the respondents a number of these choices, you can track how they make trade-offs between different levels of each attribute. Importantly, for any willingness to or discrete choice experiment, we also include price in these alternatives. So this is the show card people saw. We would tell them the percentage of price increase compared to their current bill. If they didn't already have a water bill, they saw a show card that indicated the amount of Kyrgyz samani they would be having to pay. And so we'd say, okay, 50% of your 50% increase means you're good. If your bill is currently 100 Kyrgyz samani, means you're going to have to pay an additional 50 samani. So when you then adding the price into each alternative, you run we ran a Bayes mix logit, which is an iterative estimation procedure, and allows us to get a willingness to pay for each of the service attributes for each respondent. So then this becomes the outcome variable of interest for those regressions. So program impacts. To remind you, we're going to be looking at uptake. Do they become utility company customers? What kind of infrastructure do they install, if any, a yard tap or a house tap? And then does this correspond with changes in willingness to pay? Do they increase or decrease their willingness to pay? And how can we think about economic value in terms of the time spent on water chores? Those are the outcome variables. And as I mentioned, we do not have randomization of treated households into that treated group. And so we use difference in difference. So a number of papers in the conference have talked about the difference in difference framework and showed us this very nice graph where it shows that even if households start out at different levels of the outcome variable of interest, as long as the dynamic picture is over time the same between the treatment and control group, absent the treatment, then subtracting change in one from change in the other gives you an estimate of the impact of the program. But if time varying traits are in fact correlated with the outcome, this then can give you bias in your difference in different estimates. And this is something we were worried about because, we saw so many extra houses already on the network. Not everybody, but who are the people that are already attached to the network? Ex ante, we didn't know because we didn't have our detailed survey at the time. We had to, apply for the money to get to run the baseline. So there's a lot we didn't know. And we opted for this doubly robust difference in difference that allows us to then correct for the violations of common trends. And does this by using inverse probability weights. So, and it combines that with the standard linear regression of the difference in difference model. What the inverse probability weight does is it basically gives a larger weight to control households that are more similar in terms of propensity score to treatment households. So we get as comparable groups as we can based on those key variables where we saw differences between the groups. And we then downweigh any households that are not comparable or not as comparable. The one thing you have to, or one of the things you have to look out for in a propensity score situation is that you actually have variation. So it could be that all the control groups are very poorly matched to the treatment households. Well, then they'll all get equally weighted, and then you don't get that upweighting of the more comparable households. So I don't have it here in the interest of time, but there's some diagnostics you can do to make sure that you have a good set of matching households, and ours behaves reasonably well. And so then you have this propensity score weighted difference in difference effect or result impact. So now on to the results, and I'm okay, great, almost done. This chart just shows the basic means of the portion of households that have taps and utility connections and wells at the baseline and at the end line. The light gray bars are representing the baseline, and the first set of bars, the first four pairs refer to the untreated households, and the second four are the treated households. So again, here you see the difference in the treatment and control by those gray bars. For example, much fewer utility connections in the untreated than the treated. The end line are the dark gray bars, and what you see is that there is a pattern in both groups of households that utility connections are increasing over time, reliance on wells is going down, and usage of house taps is going up. Yard taps aren't changing too much. What you can also already see from this graph is that the changes appear to be much more notable in the treatment group. So it's promising for us. It's a nice visual of the final results. And they come through very strongly when we put them in the regression framework. So the first column is the full sample, and we see that in the full sample of when we do this estimation, there's about an 8% increase in the chance that any household's going to have a network connection, and a reduction in the usage of wells as the main water source. Now, again, here we see actually that the treatment increased uptake of yard taps as opposed to house taps. But when we separate out and we partition the data by whether or not they were connected at baseline already, we see that there's actually much larger increase in house tap adoption. So most of these results are driven by people who were unconnected at baseline, which is not surprising. And then just to rush through the willingness to pay and the time use.
You're okay, just Michelle, we have fine with time, don't worry. Just speak slowly and take your time. We're okay.
Okay, great. I've been trying very hard to speak slowly, so thank you.
You're doing great, so but don't rush. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So okay, so just then what's interesting is that we do see a number of connected households who changed their status between baseline and end line. So some of these households that were connected at baseline actually are moving away from utility, the water provided by the utility company, and taking up wells as the main source of water. Strictly speaking, we should analyze this as an impact of the program, but I don't think it's the impact of fixing leaky pipes, but rather the promise of the future of metered water and the upgrade to the billing systems. We can only speculate on that, but it seems like a pretty clear relationship. Meanwhile, the people who were unconnected at baseline, these people would have then been adopting with the knowledge that the water would be metered in the future. So it's promising that the adoption rates are still pretty good. So then we wanted to better understand, like I said, the willingness to pay. And one thing I wanted to see is that because, if these people who were connected at baseline were running away from the utility company because of billing issues, I thought I would see that their willingness to pay goes down. And unfortunately, that reinforcing message isn't here. We see that the people connected at baseline are willing to pay more for quality and reducing the duration of cuts. Then the change in the willingness to pay goes up more in the treatment group for those things than in the control group among those people connected at baseline. When we look further into this, we find that this is driven by households who remain utility customers, so not the ones who are dropping out and going back to their private wells. And it's along these two dimensions that there is actually a generic decrease in the subjective valuation in the whole sample over this time period. So these people who are already customers are seeing some generic decrease in the quality of their services. And they're essentially saying to us with this result, we will pay more to not have this happen, which is interesting. Again, these are the people that stay. So if they're deciding not to revert to the wells, they are expressing an increased willingness to pay to avoid further deterioration of the services in terms of the clarity of the water and the duration of cuts. Among those who adopted TAPs and the utility, the water provided by the utility company, the willingness to pay changed for the other two attributes of the service. So that group, the treatment increased their willingness to pay for reduced frequency of cuts and improved water pressure. And this seems somewhat mysterious, but when we look at then the time use data, we find that the only category of time use that changed in the that the treatment created changes in is bathing. So a story emerges where these people who were unconnected at baseline get their tap connections and bathing becomes more convenient. And so as a result, if I'm now, if the main benefits I'm getting are in terms of better bathing experience, then it would make sense that the attributes that mean most to me are that I can count on having the water to bathe, i.e. reduced cut frequency, and that I can have adequate water pressure to bathe. So for the people unconnected at baseline, the willingness to pay is coming through this bathing channel, and changes in the willingness to pay are coming through this bathing channel. And for the people who are already connected at baseline, the willingness to pay is coming from potentially coming from this experience of challenges with the subjective quality over time. Okay, so in summary, we looked at the impact of improving water infrastructure on the adoption of network connections and on the willingness to pay for water services. We use this doubly robust difference in differences approach to get around problems with endogenous assignment of the treatment. And we assess heterogeneous impacts according to the connection status at baseline to really get at what the impacts are, because they have different causal chains for those different groups. And you can't really look at them together and get meaningful policy interpretation. We find that infrastructure improvements can in fact motivate people to switch to municipal water services, even when installation is costly and even when there is a good alternative water source available to the population. The overall numbers that there's an 8% increase in the adoption of municipal connections and an 11% decrease in the reliance on private wells. We also see increases in willingness to pay for water services, but what people are willing to pay for depends on whether or not they were customers prior to the treatment. And unlike some of the other papers in this literature, we find no observable time savings on water-related activities. And in this paper, we discuss this in a little more detail, but it actually makes sense that we don't see this big time savings because the water that people are accessing has never been very far away from their homes. So I think you know, over 95% of our sample has their water within 100 meters of their door, even if it's accessed outside. And when you do a time use data collection, you're collecting information about how time is spent in 15-minute increments. So if it takes you 5 minutes to go out and fill a bucket of water from your well or yard tap, it's not gonna really show up. And it's not going to save you tremendous amounts of time if you shift that tap inside the house. I think this is a really important point because, again, if you look at publication bias, and you have all these papers coming out saying that when you improve water infrastructure in these low and middle income countries, you get all this time savings and people can enter the labor force or have extra hour a day to build social relationships and all these wonderful outcomes. Those are getting published because they find the time savings. Now we look at other things as well as time savings, so we're able to then make this point that people are adopting it. Their willingness to pay is going up, but it has nothing to do ostensibly with economic benefits or time savings, possibly just to do with convenience, and people are willing to pay for that. Yeah, okay. And I think so. It's a few caveats and like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't end on a downer slide, but despite the positive treatment effects in our study, we still find that overall house tap adoption in Tillage is quite low. So just something to keep in mind, you know, we see good impacts. I mean, if 8% increase, that's pretty good compared to what 44% prevalence, right? But 44% is not a lot of people. So something to think about moving forward. A policy implication is that the water utility companies maybe need to think about their customers in more nuanced ways, and then focus on service attributes that matter most to them. So if I did not partition the sample between people who were and were not customers at baseline, i.e. ignoring the difference in the causal chains between the project and the impacts, I wouldn't see these differential interests or changes in willingness to pay. And so ignoring some of those more nuanced points, then it might look like people haven't responded in terms of what the money they're willing to put on the table, when in fact they are responding. Just generally speaking, and probably goes without saying, water network extensions. So extensions of the network was not part of this project, but any extensions and service quality improvements must be well managed to avoid diminishing willingness to pay in the future. And that negative trends and perceptions could undermine confidence in new water infrastructure and reduce uptake. So this is again speaking to the fact that despite the positive impact, we still only have 44% of people in Tillage connected. So still work to be done, but promising, especially for post-Soviet countries with lots of crumbling infrastructure. It may be that if you build it, they come, and you can build a nice, strong customer base to fund service improvements and maintenance. Thank you. Tilman, I can't hear you. I don't know if others can.
No, I can't.
Does it work now?
Yes.
Yes.
Better. Sorry, I switched headset and it hadn't adjusted automatically. Thank you. Fascinating paper, a lot of material. At some point you said the water service was not well run, and I thought not well run might be a very funny title for the paper, but anyway. It reminded me of the only other water service paper I've ever heard presented, or rather impact evaluation. I think it was the late Stefan Klaasen who, and I think it was a KfW intervention in Yemen. And honestly, I don't know if they ever managed to publish it, but they switched some cities, Sana presumably, from trucks to pipe-based, and it was an absolute disaster. You know, nobody wanted it, and their water quality, what Michael said in the comments, was an issue. Yeah, but it was really interesting because it was super complicated, you know, research. But in the end, it was just a, you know, it wasn't just null effect. It was not a good project. I wondered if you could have exploited, if you could have done it as an RDD, like when you showed the map, you know, and you had households just inside and just. But then later you showed the table and the sample size not that large, right? So maybe you have too few, but it just, you know, just a thought. On the time spent in by the households, I wondered if maybe you have more there than you sort of let on. If I understand the variable correctly, it seems that some households use more water, like there was something, the first line in that table, yeah? It seemed to have gone up. It wasn't significant, I realize, but I come to that in a moment. It went up. And then some of the other variables had quite large coefficients. So what I'm wondering is if, you know, if the coefficients are very large, but they're not significant, then maybe there's some heterogeneity which, you know, which cancels stuff out. And it actually is hugely significant for some people, like families with young children, for example, like nappy families, you know, or whatever, right? I mean, an agricultural household versus non-agricultural or something like that. And so I wondered if you could get it, again, the sample size is quite small, but whether you could get at subgroup heterogeneity and find for some subgroups, it really makes a difference, yeah? And my final comment in this quick battery of comments is, did you have any adverse effect of not meeting anymore? Or is this some strange Western, unrealistic male notion of somebody never carried a bucket of water in his life, that meeting at the well is a social event, yeah? And even if it's 100 meters away. So, you know, I mean, water is one of these things where you don't expect there to be an unintended negative consequence, but could that be one reason that holds people back from adopting it? Yeah. Okay, those were my questions. I wondered, I mean, people are free to leave, but can we add a couple of minutes to this session to allow for some more questions? And, you know, maybe those of us who are enthusiastic stay on, and then if somebody has to run and pick up the kids, completely fine, yeah? So that's what I wanted to say. Michael, Brody, can I hand over to you? And because maybe you would like to read out also.
Yeah, I just, you know, I noticed you had water quality measurements. So I was curious about what they were. And, you know, poorly managed gold mining tends to leach a lot of mercury and cyanide, and who knows where that ended up. And, you know, it's not like environmental management during Soviet times was extra strong either. So there could be some residue contaminants that are serious, and people aren't aware of them, noticing them if they don't smell. So I was just curious, did you have the ability to look into that a little more detail? So what were your WQ type measures?
Any other comments or questions? No?
But independent of that, I still, one of the things Michelle asked about the very first presentation is, how come not everybody's doing no-till? And there were a couple of suggestions. So, I mean, there's got to be some critical uncertainties, whether it's the transition cost, whether it's something else. So I think that would be interesting to hear more about, and particularly in the context of climate stresses on agriculture as they grow. But okay, Michelle, I asked you a question first.
Yeah, so I really appreciate the comment on the gold mining, because I know less about this region than you all, so this type of contextual information is really valuable. I did not get a chance to do water quality measurements. I was hoping to get it from other sources. The collaboration between the research group at my organization and the project implementers is not always perfect. And in this case, I had some trouble getting people to listen to me when I asked for things. So I don't have water quality, and it's disappointing. So what we did was we did subjective water quality. And obviously, it's not going to tell you the mercury and the cyanide. It's just going to tell you, is the water dirty? Does it smell bad? That kind of thing. But, you know, depending on the interest for this paper, I could possibly ask for more money to go test now, because I could say, look, the water is contaminated. This is why this is the importance of this paper. And it's a very good point.
Yeah. It's possible that one of the Kyrgyz ministries, it used to be ecology and forestry together, but I don't stay current, so it could be reorganized. I don't know. They may have some data, may have to pay for it to get it, but your local people might be able to interact.
Yeah, and I wanted to do tap. What do they call it? Where we take the sample at the tap.
Yeah.
As well as, so I know that the project will have required the utility to do testing at the plant, because that's one of the big improvements, is better management of, or improving the infrastructure at the plant, or at the water treatment plants. So there's still hope that I might be able to get data on testing. I just don't know how well I can access historical data. And then I wanted people's tap, but this was discouraged. Basically, there was like I said, trust issues, and we were asked not to invade people's homes and try and test their water, because could undermine the participation in the survey.
Yeah.
So
that's the standard WB EBRD answer.
Well, I tell you, so at EBRD, and I don't know about World Bank, but at EBRD, the bankers own these relationships with local stakeholders. And so then they get very nervous if a researcher comes in and says, let me make life inconvenient for a few people. And they're like, no, you can't do that. And then you just have to deal with that. So on the RDD, Tilman, so we did do all the possible, basically lots and lots of robustness checking. And the results are very robust to trying out different techniques, but for power reasons, we use the one that let us use the largest chunk of our sample.
But if you can get any tap water samples, that would be great, because the condition of the pipes, I would assume, is terrible.
Well, now it's better, right?
It's better. Okay.
Well, presumably now it's better. Because of the project. Yeah. I also noted these large coefficients. Haven't had the chance to look more into. I wanted to actually do more of like a machine learning approach to pull out the meaningful heterogeneity, because at that point, I don't have any pre-analysis plans beyond what I've presented, and I'm not sure where I would start, right? Looking for what's the heterogeneity we see here, like you said, children and families and stuff. But there's lots of different ways to cut and slice, and I wouldn't want to run into false positives. So, but this is something that we've thought about, how to utilize machine learning techniques for that. And then in terms of water demand, I don't actually have water demand, unfortunately. I do have bills, but we have a huge non-response for bills, and in an already small sample size, it's not very reliable to look at. So I really wanted to say something about water demand, because in making water more convenient is unquestioned, well, probably would increase demand. But of course, then you'd need, even if I had water demand from the tap, I'm sorry to the interpreter, I realize I'm speaking really fast now. Even if I had water from the water use from the utility company, I wouldn't have how much water they were pulling from their wells previously. So I wouldn't necessarily be able to understand change in water demand from the largest piece of my sample. And then the last, so the wells so the wells were on usually private. So I don't think they entailed a lot of social interaction. Moreover, in our time use module, we did ask people about time spent chatting with friends, and we don't see a change in that behavior. We also looked at, what you do is you say, what were you doing in that 15-minute period? And then, were you doing anything at the same time? And so if I was fetching water and chatting at the same time, I would be able to pick that up. And I don't see changes. So I think there are a lot of towns that do have street taps where this might be an issue, but Tillage doesn't have wide use of street taps. So in our baseline survey, I mean, there's fewer than 10 people reporting using the street taps.
That was the image I had, driving through Kyrgyzstan and seeing these things every 500 meters. Yeah. So.
And there's a very nice paper by Robin Meeks about impact of installing street taps in Kyrgyz Republic. And she does find time savings from installing street taps, but it's also, not very many minutes per day, not enough where you could go get a job or anything like that as a result of installing a tap. So
Maybe
either way, water's not far from people's
Maybe
houses.
that's the African sort of, fetching water from far away.
Yeah.
In the development community, and it just
it does not apply. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really important point, because not everywhere is Africa.
You have to go to a journal of comparative economics rather than economic development, cultural change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Great responses. Thank you so much. We did focus on the 3 papers individually a lot. We're running badly out of time. I don't know if anybody would like to make a final comment, which perhaps zoomed out more, but even if not, I think it was a very interesting session. 3 more papers on Kyrgyzstan, and with excellent data and important questions on all of them. So I really appreciate that, and I enjoyed that. For me, it was the last session of the conference. And just to say, in case you guys didn't hear it earlier, 11 and 12 of October 2023 will be the 9th annual Life in Kyrgyzstan conference. And of course, there'll be call for papers, etc. So stay tuned and follow LIK Study on Twitter, and you'll get all the updates.
Okay. Can I just say something? It's partly self-advertising, but and it's not
we only
directly...
charge $1 a minute. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Which currency today, though? I need dollars getting strong. I want to use your currency.
No pounds.
Okay.
Yeah, we can pounds over here. Not worth anything anymore.
I did some work, a couple of papers on the same topic, and the incredibly slow adoption of drip irrigation in Uzbekistan. And this actually is the reason for my question about labor costs, because I don't believe much of anything about labor costs in that country, because a lot of the pilot studies, they could have gone unpaid to who knows what they really pay people. The ag sector is so huge in terms of employment. But the other thing is is land ownership really 100% certain? But drip irrigation is a real capital cost, and no-till isn't. So the analogies aren't direct, but I think there's just a lot of huge uncertainties, and climate just increases them. And I think and we actually used real option analysis to look at potential investment strategies, and I think that's broader for adaptation in general. But I think at some level, I think I'm going to wreck your name, but Abdusame. Okay. And are you from Uzbekistan with all your associations, affiliations?
Yes, I apologize.
Okay. So I think you need to look at, see what is, instead of just trying to estimate this costs that much, that costs this much, some uncertainty analysis related to issues that are probably affecting the transition one way or another. And I got your email. I'll send you an email. And actually, I'll be in Tashkent for 5 weeks, and next semester I'll be at the new International Agriculture University in Tashkent, which is at Tashkent State Agrarian. It's actually an affiliate of a British place. So if you're in town next semester, Tashkent town, we can maybe meet. And I think there's another woman who's teaching at this new place who's also at the same place in Germany for her doctorate. So
Yeah.
anyway, I will send you an email because I noted yours down. But, you know, I think climate just increases uncertainty and volatility if you're an economist. So, which I'm not actually, but. So anyway, this was interesting. You know,
Yeah,
so thank you.
I will
And Michelle and Tilman, can we send around real quickly in the chat box emails maybe?
Sure.
Or I don't know if the organizers are planning to send them around or not, but.
No, I don't think so. That requires all sorts of data protection agreements, but whoever wants to share can share. Make sure that when you end the call, you save the files.
Yeah, that's easy to say. So I'm just putting them right now into a doc.
Yeah. All right. So the session should have been called Risk and Uncertainty and maybe even Adoption. Yeah, because Michelle, your paper in the end, you know, or rather the conclusion of your paper is we need more research on water adoption, because in the post-Soviet setting, that seems to be different from, you know, the usual settings that perhaps the literature studies. Yeah. Maybe with that, thank you. Yeah.
Are you at ISDC or IC?
No, it's the International Security and Development Center.
Oh, okay.
Or if IS opened a branch in Washington, then that would, you know, if you want to.
So where are you? I know we're supposed to.
I'm in Berlin.
Okay.
I'm also at Humboldt University, but that's a lot longer to type. And so I took this email address.
This is fine. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful.
It was an
Thanks,
interesting
everybody.
session.
Yeah, I
look
enjoyed
forward
it too.
to maybe meeting some of you guys in person eventually. So, okay.
And thank you to the interpreters.
Yes.
And apologies if we talk too quickly. But
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very
Take
much,
care.
everybody. Nice to.
bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.